This episode has a free downloadable resource. Head over to resilientretailclub.com/AI to get your guide to how not to use AI in your business. In this episode, I'm going to explain to you how not to use AI in retail businesses. Welcome to the Resilient Retail Game Plan. I'm Catherine Erdley, and this podcast is here to share retail industry trends, insights, and best practices for you, the retailer who's serious about building something that lasts. This episode is all about how you use generative AI in your business. Why do I make that distinction? Well, because there's a lot of chat about AI in retail at the moment, and a lot of that revolves around agentic AI, which I'm going to be covering in an episode coming up shortly. In today's episode, what I really wanted to talk about was you as a business owner using generative AI in your business. This is about ChatGPT style tools or Claude, and it's also about AI built into many of the tools that you've been using, like Shopify, email platforms, or accounting tools. And what I'm seeing is that almost everyone is experimenting, and lots of people are wondering what else there is that they could be doing, and perhaps starting to wonder what the pitfalls might be. So I'm going to be talking in this episode about how people are using AI right now, some of the different use cases, and also some of the reasons to be cautious and some of the things that I've started to see have become a bit of an issue in some of the businesses that I work with day to day. So let's start off with the numbers. And as usual, these vary wildly depending on how you define using AI. And what that looks like in practice is that 16% of UK businesses are formally using AI, according to government data. But if you think about it informally, around 50 to 70% of SMEs are using it, according to surveys like the British Chambers of Commerce and Intuit, who've done a fair amount of research themselves. And up to 80% of SME decision makers are saying they've used it in some way, according to research done by Enterprise Nation. So what this really means is that people saying that they're using AI is often about writing emails faster. It's not as deeply embedded yet, but it is becoming the norm. So what are people actually using it for? Well, the first main use case that we're seeing for generative AI in retail business is as an assistant as opposed to a replacement. So people are actually using it for writing support. They are using the Shopify tools to help them with product descriptions. They are getting it to draft them emails, to come up with subject lines for their newsletters, to help them create social media captions, and to write blogs. They also might be using it for things like customer communications, so FAQs. And a lot of people that I've spoken to actually use AI. The number one thing that they use it for is to take awkward customer messages and to help them rewrite it or to come up with a way of diplomatically responding to them. People are also using AI for a lot of admin, so meeting summaries, note-taking, and some basic organization. Another really important role, which I think AI can be very good for, is idea generation. So content ideas, campaign angles, or planning prompts. So what we're seeing with a lot of independent retailers, and I'm sure this will be a no surprise to anybody, is that they're using AI to help them save time. Because if it's one thing that I know about independent retailers and brands is that you are time poor. I'm sure that you have felt that a lot in your own business. Product pages, let's just talk about those for a minute, because that is a major use case that we're seeing in terms of what people are actually using generative AI for. And this is important because of the other side of AI, that agentic AI that we're going to talk more about. But AI tools are increasingly reading your product pages, interpreting your business from the information it finds there, and then using that information to help with product recommendations, which means that your product descriptions now need to explain clearly what the product is, who it's for, why it's useful, and what makes it different. So weak product pages or product pages without a lot of information on it can almost become invisible under agentic AI. This is where you can really use AI tools to your advantage, because previously I know before the advent of ChatGPT or other generative AI tools that writing product descriptions was one of the most tedious, long-winded tasks that a lot of retailers went through. And now with these tools, we can have an advantage. You know your products better than anyone. So you can work on it to come up with product pages that reflect them. AI rewards clarity, not fluff. But the one thing that I would say is, even though it is easier than ever to come up with AI descriptions for your product pages, I still think that you need to really put into it all of your knowledge and all of your thoughts about the product, why you picked it. And it's going to come on to something I'm going to touch on later, which is the best use for AI is when you give it really detailed prompts, and it can help a lot from that, as opposed to just asking it to come up with generic product descriptions. But it is useful because you can give them long prompts, and then you can ask it to format all of this information in a way that means that the product description will be read more easily by other AI agents. Another place that we're starting to see people really leaning into when it comes to AI is summarizing sales data, spotting patterns, identifying bestsellers, flagging slow-selling stock, sense-checking decisions. And tools are increasingly built into platforms like Shopify, where the sidekick has now become, frankly, a lot more helpful when it comes to finding the information that you actually want. However, this is an area that I've seen both the most advanced, but also some of the biggest issues that I've seen crop up. And that is because a lot of people have what I call messy data. So messy data is where there aren't really clear product hierarchies. The information is not really categorized very well in a way that means that the analysis is actually that helpful. So if your categories are inconsistent, and especially if your stock information is wrong, then all of these capabilities with the AI, they're just not actually going to help you. And a lot of the time, we need better inputs to have better outputs. And a lot of the work that we do with Stock Doctor actually ends up being around clean data, making the setup more strategic, making sure that the stock information is more accurate so you can actually start to leverage it properly. I would also say that a lot of people have started using it for that top level strategy, and there is definitely a confirmation bias in AI. So we're seeing lots of people asking it, should I do this? And it, generally speaking, will tell you that it's a good idea. I definitely see that AI is still very much more tactical as opposed to strategic. So it is giving you specific answers to specific questions, but it's not always seeing the full picture. This episode of the Resilient Retail Game Plan is brought to you by Faire, the online wholesale platform built for independent retailers. If you run a shop, which I know lots of you do, you'll know how much time and energy goes into finding the right products, the ones that feel unique, reflect your brand, and that your customers will really love. That's why so many retailers I work with are already using Faire. On Faire, you can discover thousands of brands, from local designers to global favourites, all in one place. You can filter by values that matter to you, like not on Amazon, eco-friendly, or made in the UK. And with their 60-day payment terms and free returns on first orders, it's a great way to try something new for your shop. If you'd like to give them a try, the team at Faire are offering you 50% off and free shipping on your first order with the code RESILIENT50. That's RESILIENT50. Valid until 31st of July 2026. Thanks to Faire for helping independent shops stay resilient, one order at a time. Customer service is another area that people are really leaning into with AI, and it's being used for handling repeat questions, delivery updates, returns information, basic recommendations. So again, with this particular use of AI, I think it's important to look at what it can do and what it can't do and where it can really help. And I think, again, as I've seen in lots of other areas of people's businesses, it works really well when there's a blend. So you don't want to risk losing the personal touch, you don't want to sound generic, and you don't want to damage trust. Your advantage as an independent retailer or brand is personal connection, so you don't want to automate that away. That said, you can look at it as what I would call a triage approach. So even pre-AI, the research showed that around 80% of customer queries could be handled by some kind of automated response. Those, the kind, where is my parcel? How long is the delivery date? If I order it today, when will I get it? All of that kind of thing. So probably 80% of all of those have always been able to be automated, but now with a lot of plugins, AI powered chatbots, things like that, it's probably easier than ever to automate the more basic requests. But what people are really leaning into is where you're using AI to triage the most basic questions, but then very quickly being able to put a human on to deal with that 20% of queries that just can't be solved that quickly. So earlier this year, I spoke to Sarah from Artichoke, and she won the Boutique Star Award for Online Retailer of the Year. And she, for example, and her team, after somebody places an online order, they call them. They call every single customer who places an order because they're able to take the efficiencies from technological advancements, but then they're keeping that human element. And I think that that's where AI works really, really well in retailers, is where you can use those advancements, as I said, to really triage the majority of those queries, but then make sure that you have got that human touch ready to go, and maybe even more ready to jump in because they have got the time to focus on a fewer number of maybe trickier problems to solve. One area that is really controversial, and I think the jury is still out on in retail, is AI for imagery. It has its use cases for sure, things like mock-ups, things like backgrounds, campaign visuals potentially, and maybe using it for concepts. I've seen a lot of people use AI to almost create very bespoke vision boards for a remodel or a new store or an idea of what a new product range might look like. And I think that's really useful. I think obviously AI imagery is appealing in terms of saving time and saving money. But I think that there's still a real concern here with things like, is it accurately representing your product? So it would be brilliant if we could get to the point where you could take a photo of one product once and then be able to use AI to replicate that across all of the different colors. But at the moment, I think that still you would have to be so certain that something that you did that with would then be correctly represented so that when the customer received that item, they weren't disappointed. That could lead to higher returns. That could lead to loss of trust. And also there's this feeling of these off visuals that customers can't quite explain. And I've been seeing this rise of certain websites where people have used AI for all of the photography, including putting up fake photos of the shop owners to make it look like it's an independent retailer when actually it may be an independent retailer, but it's not UK based, even though it says that in the name. And I think that there is a slight fear that if you find a website and it feels like the images are AI produced, it drops the level of trust from the consumer right away. So I think that AI imagery is just something that we have to be really careful with and to really, really understand what it can be used for, what's working and what's not. And it may well be that it's something that is great for doing touch-ups, but not yet a replacement for real product imagery, and certainly not real photographs of you as the shop owner. And there's also this uncanny valley effect, which is that sort of visuals being slightly off, which can really affect people's trust because people are really looking for signals that you're a real brand, that you're a real person behind the brand, that it's a real company, that it's not a spoof website, that their money's going to be safe if they spend it with you. So imagery is a really strong, powerful way to prove that. So I would say that of all of the uses of AI in independent retailers, imagery is one that is probably potentially the one that we have to really look at the most and think carefully about what you want to do. Most retailers are not necessarily using AI to build systems, even though now what we're seeing is crazy, the speed of things change. People are able to build apps by themselves, for example, things like that. They're not necessarily looking to automate everything, but they do want less admin, faster output, and definitely help getting started. So if I had to describe the mood of a lot of independent retailers when it comes to AI, I would say that a lot of people are curious, slightly skeptical, and some people are feeling kind of over the hype, and maybe that's how you're feeling too. It's an interesting topic, and we haven't even really touched on the environmental concerns or people's ethical concerns about using AI, which a lot of people have very strong feelings about. So I would say that at the moment, AI in independent retail, it feels like a lot of people, as I said, are exploring, trying things, seeing what works. So what would I suggest that you don't use AI for? Well, I do think that you need to be careful with fully AI written content because people are much better at spotting AI now, even subconsciously. People notice if the tone feels off, if the structure feels repetitive, or if the language feels generic. I'll use this example from my own business as well. A couple of years ago, I used one of the early AI tools to help me revise my onboarding email sequence. And I was able to make it sound more enthusiastic, which is something that I sometimes find a little bit hard in the written word to really convey excitement, passion, etc., etc. So I'd used this tone adjuster, as it were, from AI. And recently I was re-editing it to make sure it was all still accurate. And honestly, I was completely mortified. and in fact, if you've ever received these emails from me, then I apologize because the shift already from what feels acceptable, it was so clearly AI written. It had rocket emojis and confetti cannon emojis all over it. And I feel like what passed even a year ago doesn't necessarily pass now. So at the time, everyone, when it first came out, we were all just so excited. It was like magic. I mean, it still is like magic, a lot of it. But a lot of people used it for a lot of things. And now because it's so ubiquitous, everyone just knows that there's so much AI out there that I think that I'm actually seeing a lot of people reverse AI text in their business. In other words, take it out and write it instead. I would say watch your numbers closely. If you're using AI heavily, check your email open rates, check your click rates, check your conversion. I'm already seeing people, as I said, removing AI written text and actually seeing their performance improve. So if something drops, I would just ask yourself, does this actually sound like me or does it sound like everyone or everything else? What I think AI has absolutely meant is that a lot of retailers should no longer or should ever have a situation of being sitting there and thinking, I don't know what to do. I don't know what ideas I should do. I can't think of any ideas for my next email, my next campaign. You absolutely 100% can use AI to help you generate those ideas. It's really, really good for ideas. It's really good for structure, and it's really great for getting started. But your voice is your differentiation and is your brand. My favorite approach, or what I've seen people using that works really well, is to talk it out. So voice note it, brain dump it, and then get AI to tidy it up. Because there's a huge world of difference between spending 10 or 15 minutes brain dumping your thoughts around a topic, thinking what you feel about something, what you'd like to say, all of the kind of things that you'd like to get across to your customer, and then asking AI to put it into some post ideas or to clean it up. That will get you a lot closer to where you want to be than if you just say to a generic tool, marketing tool, create me a marketing campaign. The more you can put into it, the more likely you are to get something out that sounds close. I would be very careful with using AI for decision making. It definitely has a confirmation bias problem. If you say, I think I should do X, it will say,
that sounds like a fantastic idea. I completely agree. This is definitely the right move for your business.
It struggles with nuance, it struggles with context, and it struggles with seeing the whole picture. And it can miss really obvious practical issues. You can ask it to challenge you, to ask questions, and you can ask it to summarize your thinking. It can be a really powerful tool to get it to say to it, I want you to challenge me. I want you to ask me a whole load of questions and for you to verbally process whatever decision it is that you want to make, rather than just asking it to give you the right answer. So using it for thinking and rather than deciding is a better case, in my opinion, for using AI. So it's very different to talk for 20 minutes and process out loud and then get it to summarize it for you than it is to tell me what to do. So this is how I put it in 2026. There is no reason at all to sit in front of a blank page, but there is every reason to sound like yourself. The retailers who get the most from AI won't be the ones who hand everything over. They'll be the ones who use it to think better, move faster, and stay distinct. Thank you so much for listening. Don't forget to like, follow, or subscribe, depending on where you listen to your podcast, to be the first to know about each new episode. Why not come over to Instagram at Resilient Retail Club and tell me what you thought of today's episode. And then in a couple of weeks' time, we're going to be talking about agentic AI, which is when it's actually the robots doing the shopping.